Hello, hello, Church Ops family. So excited to be back with you all to spend some more time talking about church operations and all things that come along with it. Today, the topic we've got, I think, is one of the most underrated topics that I've seen in quite a while. We don't spend a lot of time talking about it, but I have found that it is vital to the process of helping to grow your church, especially if you are working from church plant stage or you are working from kind of like the beginning stages. This key component is vital to the process. And often, I don't think we take very much time to discuss this topic or to discuss the impact of it. So before we jump in, as always, I ask that you like the content wherever you're consuming it, that you would share it so that we can get this content out to as many people as possible. Like, rate, all those fun things. So let's jump into our topic for today. Today, we are going to spend some time talking about relationships. I know that seems very unlike anything that we would need to cover for the sake of church operations, but I believe that relationships are one of the most vital things that allow you to leverage so many different parts of your ministry, and not just any relationships, but great relationships. Great relationships open doors. They create pathways to solve problems you often could not solve on your own, and they create opportunity that you would often not see on your own. So when you're willing to invest in relationships, you can find that a lot of doors open, a lot of opportunities present themselves, and you get to create some really great strategic opportunities. Now, of course, relationships, hear me say this, need to be authentic. We are not generating a relationship just to leverage it for something else. So at the core of all of this, we are called to be good people. And because this is a faith-based podcast, we're called to be good Christians. So hear all of this through the lens of authenticity. You should be creating genuine relationships, not relationships just to serve your needs or your agendas. So there are a couple of different types of relationships that I think are vital for us to look for. One of the first ones, I call it a low-hanging fruit relationship. These relationships require very little from one party, but greatly benefit the other party. Often when we begin in the beginning stages of ministry, we do have some free time. We've got some space in what we're doing. There's opportunity. And many times there are people who have needs within our community, within our church, often our school systems, community centers, other nonprofits have these basic needs. And if we're willing to meet some of those needs, it creates a low-hanging fruit relationship for us, especially because it does not require a lot from us. An example of this would be, we actually formed a great relationship with a school here in the area. And one of the big things that they focus on is helping their people who have English as a second language, helping them develop their conversational skills. So 1 hour a week, we go over, we meet with these students, and we speak English. And we get the opportunity to not only build relationship with them, we get to share about our faith, we get to hear about where they're coming from. And it's this sweat equity. Often at the beginning of any church plant, you've got a lot more sweat equity than you do finances, resources. And these type of low-hanging fruit relationships can be huge to open up doors. We're now at a place with that relationship where we're actually being asked to come over. The organization is providing resources so that we can better serve their community. It did not start out that way, but we've arrived there because we were willing to engage in a low-hanging fruit relationship, a relationship that required very little of us, but had a great impact on the others. So when you're thinking about those types of relationships, how you build them, where they come from, this is a great starting place. Looking around your community, looking around and talking to people in the area, and looking for these low-hanging fruit relationships. Another type of relationship that I've noticed that are super helpful in helping to build the operations and the growth of your church are slow growth relationships. These are relationships that you're investing in over time, and they may not really produce anything at the beginning. They may require a good amount of your time and focus, but the potential resources that they can produce for in the future can be phenomenal when it talks about kind of the impact to your ministry. One of the places we've seen this be really big, I've seen it be big, and an example is choosing to help support a sport community. Being a chaplain or being someone who spends time supporting one of these organizations and asking nothing in return. It will require a good amount of time and dedication, but what it also does is give you access to great relationships, to great opportunities, open doors, open pathways that are built over time. Now, you have to be very strategic with these types of relationships because the slow growth relationships often demand a good amount of your time. So when you're thinking about these types of relationships, you have to make sure that you don't have too many of these slow growth relationships. You've got to be very strategic in them. Like I said, often I find that serving a local school system or a university or a community center are often great ways because not only does it allow you to support that community, it gives you access to friendships with the people who are the donors for those different organizations. It gives you an opportunity to attend events where other folks who are giving into the different nonprofit communities are coming together. You're getting to hear more needs that are in the area. It gives more of a platform for you to be known and for you to be able to engage the community at a higher level. So you've got these low-hanging fruit relationships that are huge. You also have these slow growth relationships. And remember, when you're thinking about these, you don't want a lot of these. You want a few, and you want them to be very strategic. So if you have universities in your area, ones that you can serve and engage in, you've got school systems that are in your area that you can serve or engage in. It may require a lot, but you can never really quantify the return rate that you'll get on the other side with these relationships. The next type of relationship that we're looking at is called a tit for tat relationship. Tit for tat relationship. These are the relationships that from the jump mutually benefit both parties. It lightens the load for both parties and potentially solves problems for both parties. Often smaller organizations can benefit larger organizations by filling a specific need and then giving opportunity for that smaller organization to be able to have some of the resources, access to some of the platforms and the connections. An example of that would be for us when we stepped into this building, the current space that we are in, we actually did not own it. It was vacant, essentially. And the folks that own the building were in a place where if they could not get people into the space using it, they would be in a situation where they would have to reclassify the space, which would then cost them an incredible amount of money in taxes and other things. So when we sat down to the table with them, we didn't have the money to pay rent. We didn't have any of those things that would be useful in that sense. But we often said, hey, you've got a building and we've got a vision. We were able to come in, fill the space, use it, not needing to pay rent for it, but also solving a problem for this larger organization. They were no longer in the situation where they would need to reclassify the building or would need to change how things were done and deal with all of the paperwork, all of the red tape that would come along with that. And for us as a church starting out, we were able to have a place that we didn't have to live in the setup, tear down world anymore. We didn't have to worry about sharing the space with multiple people, multiple relationships. We were able to now own essentially the space under their covering. It also allowed us to not need to worry about paying taxes, all of these other things, and gave us a strategic window to build the financial resources of our ministry without needing to pay out a lot. We continue on down the road in this story. We eventually buy the building. We're now the owners of the building, and we are seeing exponential growth in this space. But it all started with a tit for tat relationship. So we've got these type of relationships, and many times when you think about a slow growth relationship or a low hanging fruit relationship, many times it can give way to a tit for tat relationship. So when you're thinking about how you engage in those relationships, you always be thinking about the through line of what it could become in a year's time, what it could become in 2-3 years time. One of the best versions of this is being able to get to a place where you potentially have multiple pieces of this kind of these relationship ideas coming together, and you begin to leverage the relationship connections and the resources. And this kind of next tier functioning is another type of relationship that I think you can develop over time when you commit to working on these low-hanging fruit relationships, you commit to working on these slow growth relationships, and you commit to working on these tit for tat relationships. And that is the second, third, and fourth degree relationships that can develop. So what do I mean by that? Two relationships that you have that they don't inherently, or they may or may not be meeting a specific need that you have in this time, or you may or may not be meeting a need that they have, but you realize through communication that one of the parties that you are in relationship with has resources or a need that another party in your relationship circle can fill. Now you become almost a matchmaker of sorts, and through that relational building you're able to bring those two people together. So what does that do? One, it puts you in a place to be able to serve those around you, thereby strengthening the relationships that you have with them. You're able to meet a specific need that they have. And whenever you're able to meet the needs of the people around you, it automatically starts to build relationship and starts to build openness and trust. When you're able to do that, that happens. And another thing that happens is you begin to bring multiple circles, relationship circles together. These people may have not known one another before, but they all have their own circle of relationships. And now those relationships are coming together, creating a larger relational circle that you are a part of, and helping to develop these second, third, fourth, and sometimes fifth degree relationships. They can become huge in the process of how you're functioning. And often this is the place you develop to when you commit to the low-hanging fruit relationships, the slow growth relationships, and the tit for tat relationships. Now, we hear all this information and you say, hey, that's great. These are all great ideas when it comes to relational building. But how? How do we do this? How do we build these types of relationships? Well, surprisingly, it's actually pretty easy to do. It just requires time, consistency, and the dedication to the process. It requires those three things in a very specific pattern. So first, you've got to be able to look at your day, look at how your day works, and find specific windows of time where you're going to work on this relational building, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon. Many times as a church plant or a smaller church, you don't have an office space. So you can begin to think about where are potential places to have office space that don't cost finances, but get me around a lot of people to build relationships. So as a church plant, no office space, or a church of the larger size where you're still sharing space, making your office the local businesses and coffee shops and diners in the area is one of the best ways to get in front of people to build relationship. Think about the consistency of going to the same place every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, every Friday. You begin to create a schedule where you are a regular at some of these places. What will that do? One, it will put you in the midst of a lot of people who often have that pattern, who come in every day to grab a cup of coffee, or come in every day to work on a project, or work on that day consistently as part of the organization that's there. Many times, business owners have other businesses, or are working with other business owners. And as you begin to be in that space, you're going to be able to identify these rhythms, these people. You're going to be able to identify some of the things that are going on. Now, as you're picking these spaces, that consistency piece, the next piece is asking questions. Get really curious about the people around you. I would say this is a good practice, not only when you're out and about, but at your church. Begin to be a person who asks a lot of questions. How did you hear about our church? If you're in your church building, where are you coming from? Getting to know the origin story of where they're going, what they're doing. And of course, one of the most important, what do you do for a living? Often this information begins to create great opportunities for you to share. And when you are consistent in the same places over and over again, you begin to learn names. They begin to learn your name. You begin to build familiarity, and the conversations that you have each time you're in those spaces begin to develop, and you begin to hear over time, hey, this has been a real struggle for us, and we're trying to figure this or that out. And you get a wonderful opportunity to potentially get into a low-hanging fruit relationship. Or as you build the relationship, you begin to say, hey, do you know anybody who's looking for renters in the area for spaces, or anyone who is in a space right now where they're kind of crunched and they need help, they need resources, they need people? Often in working these places, People will have that information. And as you've built relationship over time by being consistent, by showing up and being dedicated to the process, you'll get to start hearing these things and being able to put different parts and components of this together. So asking these questions, being in these spaces consistently, intentionally building relationship, being curious, asking a lot of questions, and then beginning to look for ways to engage in these types of relationships that I've talked about. So when you think about what is possible in light of this information, hopefully you can see just how key your relationship building can become. And if you find that you don't have a lot of time for this, maybe you are bivocational, often in a smaller setting, that is the case. You don't get the opportunity of being a full-time pastor or a full-time leader within the ministry. You then have to become very strategic. But here's the great thing. Even a little bit of consistency can move the ball really far forward. So maybe you say Monday through Friday, I've got a 9 to 5. I'm there all day. I really don't have any windows throughout the week to do this. Well, Saturday is a day. Or get it and you say, in light of this, I have on my way into the office, I've got a 30-minute window. Or if I start my day maybe an hour earlier, I've got a 45-minute window where I can pop into this coffee shop, this business location here. I can begin to frequent the same grocery store and begin to build relationship with the store owner, beginning to think about where are those little places throughout your day that you can invest even at a small amount into these relationships. Because again, we are after consistency, and a small amount of time spent in each one of these places can over time build a very solid relationship that is a low-hanging, slow grow, or a tit for tat relationship. And maybe even in the process of you begin to develop second, third, or fourth degree relationships in the conversations you're consistently having. So when you think about your patterns, you could go to a different grocery store every week. You could go to a different hardware store every week. You could go to a different car repair person every time there's an issue for your car. But where are these places that you're already naturally going that you can begin to build strategic relationship? When you think about the location of your church, is there a place where you can commit? Every Sunday afternoon, we're going to go to this place and have coffee or have lunch, or at least on a consistent basis, consistent enough to start building relationship with the owners, start building a relationship with the people who are regularly there, again, with the specific purpose of looking for a low-hanging fruit need that you can meet, or the potential for a slow growth relationship, or the opportunity for a tit-for-tat relationship. You have to be out there, you have to be present, and you can't allow just the work of the ministry of Sunday to Sunday to consume you. Otherwise, you miss out on what I believe is one of the hidden gems of building and growing a strong church community and pushing beyond that barrier of 500, hence the Church Ops 500 name. So hopefully this information today was encouraging for you, gave you insight and thought and direction as to how you can leverage some great pieces of potential when it comes to the growth of your ministry. Remember, the amount of resources don't speak for you, but how you use them says everything. I firmly believe that each and every day you can do the impossible with less. If we know how to use our resources and we begin to build these relationships, I think over time, you'll see that the access you get from these become leverage building, momentum shifting opportunities for your ministry. And all that it requires of you is to be strategic with your time, to look to build these relationships, to look for opportunities to ask questions, to learn more about the people around you, and begin to connect them with other folks and look to meet needs. Thank you guys so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. Hopefully this will help encourage you, help you better understand a pathway to grow your church. As always, I ask that you share this content. You continue to rate, like wherever you're watching, however you're listening, so we can continue to get this information out to those folks that truly want to see their church come alive, grow beyond some of these barriers, and really manage the operations of their ministry well.